The only person who could drive Charles Bronson insane with wrath was not another action star or a reviewer who disparaged his films, but rather someone who made fun of his worst insecurities while he was filming The Dirty Dozen. The director believed it to be a joke, but Bronson never forgot the humiliation, and the hatred was so intense that he continued to discuss retaliation 30 years later. The deepest feud in Hollywood is finally revealed. Charles Bronson, who was born Charles Dennis Bukinski in a destitute coal mining town in Pennsylvania, was never meant to be famous. He was the 11th of 15 children, and his parents were Lithuanian immigrants who lived a life of survival. When he was just 6 years old, he was so impoverished that he had to wear his sister's. He didn't speak English because they couldn't afford proper clothing, and he only spoke Lithuanian and Russian, which made him feel like an outsider in his own country. That rough, silent strength you see in his movies wasn't an act, it was who he had to become to survive. When his father passed away, when he was just 10 years old, while other children were playing or going to school, he went straight into the coal mines. The work was brutal, dangerous, and suffocating. For 12 hours a day, he dragged coal in narrow tunnels for only $1 a ton. Despite everything, he continued to dig, push, and even gave up his own clothes for his younger siblings. Despite all of that, he managed to graduate from high school, becoming the first person in his family to do so, and at the age of 21, he saw a chance to escape the mines and enlisted in the Army Air Forces during World War II as a gunner on a B-29 bomber flying missions over Japan. He faced real danger on one mission, where he was wounded and received a Purple Heart, but even during the war, he felt that his life had improved. He once remarked, "I was eating and sleeping well, which was luxury compared to home." People later questioned his service, but his records were genuine. After the war, he juggled jobs until one unexpected opportunity changed everything. He was hired by a small theater company, not to act but simply to paint scenery. Standing close to the stage, something clicked, and he began taking small parts. It turned out that he had a natural presence, he wasn't loud or. When Charles Bronson first entered Hollywood in 1950, his face told a story of hardship worn down and shaped by a difficult childhood. He didn't look like a typical leading man. Instead, casting directors saw muscle, a face like stone made for villains, thugs, and henchmen roles with no names, no lines, just a punch to throw or a bullet to take. He wasn't even Charles Bronson yet. His real name was Charles Kinski, but during the McCarthy-era Red Scare, he knew that name sounded too foreign, so he changed it to Bronson, borrowing it from. The same Bronson worked non-stop in the early 1950s, appearing in one movie after another. He played background goons, nameless soldiers, and the kind of characters you forget as soon as they leave the screen. Even when he stood next to stars, he was invisible. He didn't smile or talk much, but his presence lingered. There was something in his eyes that said, "You don't know me yet, but you will." The Bronson Gate at Paramount Studios was a small act, but one that helped him survive in a town that wanted all its stars to look, talk, and sound. In 1954, Bronson played Captain Jack in a western starring Alan Ladd, and that moment eventually arrived with Drum Beatat. Although it was based on actual events, Bronson didn't simply act, he became that man. His countenance conveyed the pride, pain, and passion without the need for many words. He stole the entire film, according to one reviewer, and it wasn't just a compliment, it was a warning shot. The jail cell scene near the end, where Bronson was thug number 2, revealed a side of him. He was given a place at the adult table after Hollywood disregarded his sense of humor, human edge, and natural rhythm for too long. For years later, the public took notice for the first time, and Bronson received something even more significant, his name at the top of the poster machine. The Gun Kelly was a low-budget movie that was produced quickly, but Bronson turned it into something memorable. He played gangster George Kelly like a man haunted by his own reputation, strong on the outside and scared on the inside. Susan Kwatt played his cold-blooded girlfriend, and the two of them created tension that crackled. There was a scene in which Bronson robbed a bank with no dialogue at all, just his body language and icy stare doing the talking. Critics weren't impressed. They were shocked that it was gritty and real people began to whisper that perhaps this guy could carry a film, but Hollywood didn't listen yet. He starred in a TV show called Man with a Camera and continued to land solid supporting roles in big-budget movies like The Magnificent Seven, The Dirty Dozen and The Great Escape, but never as the main character. He was in his 40s by the time most actors would have given up on being famous, but Bronson wasn't made to give up, and American studios ignored him. In France, Europe noticed something different. Germany and Italy, it had been difficult for years, but he was a hero who was calm, cool, and strong. European filmmakers admired his quietness, his gaze, and the tension he carried even when he wasn't speaking. Audiences on the other side of the world made him a star long before his home country did. He once remarked that he looked like a dynamited rock quarry, and producers agreed, so they continued casting him since Hollywood didn't know what to do with him because he was too ethnic, too rugged, and not attractive enough. As anything other than himself, Native Americans, Mexicans, Italians, and Greeks. When director John Sturges cast him as Bernardo O'Reilly in The Magnificent Seven, he was 39 years older than most breakout actors, but this role gave him something new. He played a gunman with a conscience, someone who understood that true courage wasn't just about shooting. In one scene, he told the village boys that their fathers who toiled the land every day without seeing any reward were the real heroes. That quiet power stuck with audiences, especially in Europe where the film became a huge hit. It didn't just set Bronson's international career, it demonstrated that he could have meaning behind his muscles. 3 years later, The Great Escape gave him another opportunity to show that he wasn't just a tough guy. He played Danny, a claustrophobic soldier who had to dig tunnels for a daring prison break. Bronson's fear wasn't acting like a child. He had worked in coal mines after his father passed away, so he knew what it was like to be trapped underground. This raw fear gave the role weight. Director John Sturges cast him specifically to show that the strongest man in the room could still be vulnerable. The result was unforgettable, especially in Europe, where he was already becoming a quiet icon. However, as his fame grew, his personal life began to fall apart during the filming of The Great Escape. Despite the fact that Jill Ireland was married to his friend and co-star David Macklem, Bronson fell in love with her. Hide his feelings while dealing with the death of his mother and the breakdown of his own marriage, he made a move that shocked everyone. It caused a rift, but it also changed his life. He and Ireland married in 1968 and remained together for more than 20 years. She wasn't just his wife. She was his co-star in over a dozen films together, making them one of Hollywood's most famous screen couples, especially in the 1970s when Bronson finally became well known in America. That same tough exterior followed him to The Dirty Dozen, a star-filled war movie shot in England in 1966. With more ego than space on set, Bronson didn't make things easier on himself. Already known as Charlie Sunshine on set for his moody demeanor, the shoot was difficult and took months to complete. One day, his co-star Lee Marvin disappeared, only to be found out later that he had gone out drinking and needed to be dragged back from a local pub. He was barely sober for the next scene. It was chaos, but somehow the movie became the biggest hit of 1967, surpassing major titles and making millions of dollars, but not every memory from that set was a victory. Because he was 5 feet 8 inches, Bronson had always been self-conscious about his height, and during a group scene, director Robert Aldrich felt it would be amusing to put him between the two tallest actors on the set, Donald Sutherland and Clint Walker. Charles Bronson spent years playing tough guys in the background while prettier actors took center stage. He was in movies like The Magnificent Seven and The Dirty Dozen, but no one in Hollywood gave him the lead because his face was too rough and his presence was too intense, and studios continued to cast the same clean-cut heroes. The effect was immediate and humiliating, and everyone noticed that Bronson was furious, but Aldrich just laughed. By 1968, when he was 47 and still unpopular in America, Bronson packed his bags and left for Europe, just like Clint Eastwood had done before him. The only difference was that Europe recognized something that Hollywood didn't, and they didn't give a damn if he wasn't attractive. When France approached, one of the biggest stars in Europe, Alain Delon, specifically asked Bronson to co-star in Adieu Lame. The producers were blunt: Europe doesn't care about pretty faces, they care about character. When the film made millions of dollars, the French audience was enthralled, and Bronson finally got the screen time he deserved. The chemistry between him and Delon was unfiltered and captivating, and both the box office and critics noticed. As a result, fate gave Bronson another chance. Bronson was offered the part of a mysterious shooter playing a harmonica in Once Upon a Time in the West by Sergio Leone, the brain behind The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Years prior, Bronson had declined Leone's offer. A fistful of dollars is the offer. The part that made Eastwood famous, and now Leone received his.